Hello, everybody, and welcome to SOULScast number 2. This time, we're going to be covering the healer changes everybody's discovered through the media tour. Once again, thank you to Mr. Happy for his extended coverage on Dawntrail. This evening, I am joined once again by Roxas.
Hey up, guys.
But I'm also joined by another lovely member, or I guess now former member of the Souls FC, but just as valuable because they're very good at healer, Izamain.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
There we go. Right. So, without further ado, we're just going to jump straight into it. First class we're going to talk about. One of the ones that has the least amount of changes, which seems to be par for the course, will be Scholar. So yeah, just very quickly going through the changes that I was watching through Mr. Happy's videos, and then just scouring through the internets to see what else people were talking about. Nobody really seems to care that much about Scholar at the moment, at least compared to the rest of the healers.
I thought you take this one, is it? Because you're more of a scholar.
Immediately throwing it over.
I have a few things to say about Scholar, but yeah, it hasn't got like major changes, but it has got like its level 100 change is probably the biggest, obviously.
Yeah, Seraphism.
From what I'm aware, using Seraphism, like this, obviously it's a new skill and it's always going to be a positive, but like I'm sure when you're in Seraphism, now you can't use Dissipation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with Seraphim being 3 minutes, if you use that on like a 2-minute window where you'd eat a fairy for like damage, essentially, like you're being kind of cooked that way. So you can't like use another 300. You're losing 300 potency in like 2-minute buff window. So like that's one of the drawbacks. But like apart from like the healing side of it's going to be strong, like regardless. Like, and Scholar's always going to be in a spot where I think it's just going to be good for like pure mitigation and general use anyway. I don't think it's going to be in a position where it'll be like, I don't know, where we'll go back to like early Astrologian days or White Mage days at like level 80, where it was just kind of meh.
They have some enhanced like succor and stuff, don't they? Is it like a 20% potency increase on the enhanced succor? So
I think like the biggest thing is the instant cast as well. Like the instant cast shields are like succor. So when you're going into like movement heavy phases, where I'm trying to think of an example, let's say like Pangenesis or like Hello World in top, like those like require a lot of movement. Or even like when you're doing, when we're doing Mario Kart in Dragon Song Ultimate, where you're kind of having to like run around the boss or run through the boss while the exploding shit's going off.
Yeah.
And you're trying to heal that, like stuff like that is going to be good for like those type of fights where you don't need to worry about having swift cast and you need to get shields up instantly, where Sage like excels. The only problem with that, it's every 3 minutes, so you do need to use it wisely.
Because Seraphism is the one that gives you instant casts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it like upgrades, you upgrade and instant cast.
How long is it for?
How long was it for again? I'm trying to find it. Was it
Seraphism?
15?
I think it was 15 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, so you get like 7 casts, 7, 8 casts, maybe. I don't know. I think it's good, but I personally don't see like Scholar as like one of the stronger healers in my opinion. With it not like we're barely changing, like the because they get an AoE dot from enhanced chain stratagem, don't they? Which gives impact imminent, which gives the spell baneful impact, and it's an AoE dot. Granted, is I think it is off global cooldown.
It is, yeah.
It's only 140 potency, which I don't know. It feels like, I mean, great that it's off global, but it just feels, I don't know, a bit weak. I mean, it's all right. I don't know. Apart from like obviously Seraphism, there's not really too much that stands out for me for Scholar. I feel like they could have done something better. Like on a like a separate note of Seraphism, I do feel like it's very strange that they went for like an angelic look, like as opposed to like a fair look, because that's what Scholar's designed around. But there's the Seraphism look; it looks very angelic. I don't know. I just thought that was a little bit strange direction. But
It doesn't bother me, like in terms of how it looks. I feel like they don't know what the identity of what a Scholar looks like. Like it's changed like drastically from like have Realm Reborn, and with all the changes to summon at the same time, it's kind of like probably lost its place and its like look identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not getting like any like job quests anymore that really expand on the lore as to why they have these. I don't believe. I don't think we got them this expansion, did we? For like White Mage and stuff at like level 90. We had the job role quest, but we didn't have like specific.
Nothing that was
Job.
like as in depth from like Shadowbringers, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
So,
so
like,
so Seraphism is 20 seconds and 180 recast.
Oh.
So yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
until they do that again, I think they'll just be lazy with the design of how it looks until they can rewrite it. So yeah.
And that's the same cooldown time as Benediction. Is it 3 minutes?
Yeah, 3 minutes. 3 minutes is usually the biggest. Like
It
cooldown.
is. Yeah, it's a lengthy cooldown.
So there was something that the healers are getting generally as a change. The Swiftcast is getting a buff from, what is it, 60 seconds to 40 seconds recast?
Yes.
Do we think this is the start of them trying to get away from immediately obvious 2-minute cooldowns?
No, I don't think that's the case with it.
No?
I think it's the case that I do think they were going to remove the raise on Summoner
Mm.
this expansion because they did talk about it. And with them like going back on that and still having it, I think they've kept the Swiftcast the same as well. So then healers
Okay.
have more like time to like raise rather than to be sitting doing a long cast. Like it's not as punishing if they remove that.
Mm.
But
Oh, okay.
yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons, but maybe not just that. Like there's all the casters have it, not just the healers. So
Yeah. Well, it's not obviously, it's not immediately obvious, like, because you've got the 60 and you've got the 120 second stuff. 40, 80, 120.
Yeah.
So, you know, it still fits, but it's not like immediately so obvious that it's fitting into that 2 minutes because it is like such a long recard. So I was just wondering if maybe you thought that, but no, it's, I mean, this whole 2-minute conversation, you could talk about it with every single job in the game, considering they were talking about it for the live let stuff, but I'm going to try and avoid it because it seems to be like one of the most hotly contested topics of the entire expansion at the moment. I just thought it was a good question to ask.
Yeah.
Anything else about Scholar? Because personally, I was watching the Mr. Happy stuff and scrolling through some of the literature that's been posted about the jobs online, and nobody really seems to bother that much about Scholar. Like, I mean, Roxas is saying that you don't think it's one of the stronger classes in the game, especially for healers, but it seems to just do its job every single expansion. It has minimal changes. It gets slightly better each time with increased potencies and maybe a new shield thing or a new instant cast thing. And in Dawntrail, it's no different. So in terms of strength, do you think this is still going to kind of stay, in your opinion, kind of at the lower end of the healers?
I do personally, because I mean, I won't get like on topic too much of the other healers, but when you compare it to like Astrologian and Sage, I just feel like it does lack. Like it's not been made redundant. Like if people wanted to play it, people will play it. People like the class. I just feel like you've got better options personally. But yeah, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Obviously, that's just how I feel about it.
No, you have to be objectively correct in everything you do in this game, Roxas. All right.
You're not allowed an opinion in this game.
This is a competitive environment where you are wrong and I am right.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there is some
what about you,
small
Easy?
changes. The small changes, which I think are quite nice, is the reduction to recitation on Scholar, which I didn't think was going to happen. I didn't think that really needed to, because like it's guaranteed crit shield. Like, you know, it's strong as it is, and it reduces the mana cost, and it's a free ether flow usage. But yeah, that there itself, it's going to be useful to see how that plays out. Like, especially in raids, because it's like such a useful tool.
Yeah, because it's quite a chunky reduction, isn't it? It was like 30 seconds or something, down to 60 seconds a minute every minute.
Yeah, overall, it's just going to be like a better use. Like, it doesn't really change in how the job will play, you've just got more resources to use. Like I've got another like issue with the amount of resources the game has for the content is at the moment, but it's so much to talk about later, I guess.
Well, yeah, we'll move on to the dreaded healer strike, and then thoughts about healers in general. But that will come later after all of the job stuff. So, anything else to do with Scholar?
I think like that's about it. It's probably like one of the like simplest. I think like there's not much changes to it except Seraphism, and even then it's not really adding a new skill. You're using your skills that already exist almost.
Yeah, the kit has barely changed, but it's still good. It's still, the changes are still nice. Like
Yeah.
Seraphism, like the instant cast will be a massive boon to scholars for sure.
Yeah, very true. Right, so we're going to move on to the next healer that seems to have very minimal changes aside from one DPS one, which is pretty big. The Sage. Roxas, you're going to be a Sage main in the expansion, I assume?
Yes.
All right, what are your immediate thoughts and opinions on Dawntrail Sage?
My thoughts on Sage, I am happy with the changes that they've made. Because when you have new jobs from the previous expansion, you always come into it thinking they're not going to change it too much. And Sage definitely falls into this category. Now, one thing that I wasn't expecting, and I'm sure scholars are very salty about it, is the double dot. I wasn't personally expecting the dots to stack with each other.
Yes, that's the big thing, yeah.
Yeah, it was massive. And the fact that it also has a potency increase over not using it shows that depending on where the development team want to go with it, they're wanting you to use this double dot, unless it changes before Dawntrail comes out, but I don't think that it will do. It might do, it might not, depending. It's currently got, I think with doses 3, which is a potency of 360, your dot takes for 40 potency, which is a total of 400. So it's got 40% more potency than just using doses 3. I think it's going to be interesting because obviously you've got to be in melee range to use this as well, which is another thing that you've got to put into factor, is that Sage is also going to be another melee. But yeah, depending on obviously coming back to the thing that we talked about in the previous SOULScast is the difficulty of the fights and how you're going to be able to keep this dot up. It's a lot to work with, I think, but it will definitely attract old scholars who enjoyed the multiple dots. It will definitely take them down that avenue of I might try Sage out because I really like this thing that they're getting.
Yeah.
The other changes are good. They get I'm not even going to try to pronounce some of these names, but
say it,
Psyche,
try it, do it.
Psyche, I don't know whatever it's called.
Yeah. What about the extra dot that you have? Can you pronounce it?
Eucrasian dyscrasia.
Oh,
I can do that.
There you go. Okay. Thought we're gonna have another Chimera situation.
Oh, don't bring it up. So yeah, Psyche, every 60 seconds, a 600 potency instant cast. You can't go wrong with an instant cast high potency spell, especially damage. And even the level 100 spell, like Philosophia, increases healing by 20% for 20 seconds, which is good, which means it'll increase your shields. It basically gives I'm not even going to say that. Eudaimonia, whatever the buff is called, which is basically an AoE cardia for everyone.
Yeah.
The good thing about that is that it does stack with healing spells as well. So, say if you're doing the end of a tier fight, and you're getting the AoE after AoE after AoE. If you pop in this, but with other spells that are in the Sage kit, like Panheimer, which is just AoE, barrier after AoE, and also the healing as well from Philosophia. It's gonna be good for Sage to keep on damaging, while they're also healing and redoing barriers and stuff. And it also stacks with Cardium on the main tank as well, which is good. So it sounds really good. I'm very happy with the way that Sage has gone. They've not got much, but for what they've got, you can definitely feel it and you can see it.
Yeah.
Which is my comparison to Scholar. which is, it's been out for a long time as Scholar, and I just feel like to say that Sage is a new class, I feel that Scholar didn't get the justice that they deserved. I feel like they should have got more to the kit.
Right.
Yeah, I'm happy with the way that Sage has gone for the expansion, and it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes and if there's any changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, so just on that point before I go to you, Izu, the difference between Sage and Scholar, I mean, obviously aesthetics, it's very, very different, but since they're both shield healers, what makes you personally want to go Sage over Scholar?
Um,
Or is it literally just purely aesthetics? Which is totally fine.
It is aesthetics. I don't know really. Like, I feel like there's just a little bit more to do in Sage. I feel like Sage has got a little bit more damage going on. But then this is the thing, like, Scholar's got chain stratagem, so it's like the thing that did bother me a little bit about Sage is that when Sage came out, we were promised like a dynamic play style of Sage. Like, it was going to be different from the other healers, but unfortunately, I feel like it's failed to deliver on that aspect. I feel like it's somewhat fallen into the other categories of the other healers, and I feel like there's not like a difference between the jobs. They've all like kind of melded into the same play style almost.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But other than that, like, I just feel like it's got a bit more to its kit than Scholar. I feel like, I don't know, like, for me, I can't remember what the AoE thing, Sacred Soil, is it? The barrier for Sage? Is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
I
Not
always forget
for
the name of it.
Sage is a sacred soil. That's
The
No,
scholars.
That's Scholar, yeah.
Scholar's Sacred Soil, but like the barrier for Sage, I just feel like it's better because it stays on you, like, as whereas like with Scholar you have to stay in the bubble. Like, granted, it is very big, but I don't know. I just feel like Sage is for me a little bit more fluid, more instant casts. But then Seraphism also changes this for Scholar. So they're both good shield healers, but this is another situation. This is another thing to talk about as well. Is like we were given that Scholar and Sage were going to be barrier healers, and that White Mage and Astrologian were going to be pure healers. And I feel like Sage has got a lot of regions going on. I feel like that the barrier between barrier and pure healer is just like falling away because other classes that were supposed to be pure healers are getting a lot of barriers as well. And I feel like that this difference is just no longer a thing anymore with the changes that are coming, especially to Dawntrail. I don't know how you guys feel about that as well.
Yeah, like it seems like this. I don't know if it's too much they're giving to healers. Like I feel like sometimes we have too much OGCD stuff rather than actually like, doing the healing job with GCDs. Like you can literally finish a fight with just OGCDs, and like they're thinking about what can we do next. That isn't like give the region healer another region. Oh, let's give it like damage mitigation. Or let's give it a shield, and then it just starts to like meld with the like other role, and it's kind of like I don't know. Like you have Sage and then Scholar, and Sage is literally the equivalent to the White Mage of the shield healers. Like it doesn't have the like raid damage increase. It has like the big nukes, and then you have like Scholar and Astrologian, which are the similar like counterparts for each other in theirs, but they still like. I'll get onto Asta in a minute, I'm guessing, but yeah, like we have too much regions as a shield healer and too many shields as a region healer, and it's just becoming a bit like where does that line like is supposed to be in the game? Where does it like stop? And like it's just becoming too blurred now.
But yeah, I
feel
think.
like
No, go on.
Sorry, Don.
No,
I
you
feel
go.
like job identity. Like, this is the thing that I'm talking about. Like, all the healers are kind of merging into one. And we'll obviously go into this a little bit in the healer striking, so I won't talk about it too much. But I feel like there needs to be a little bit more job identity with healers. Because the kits are just they're looking very same across the board. You just kind of get them at different levels and stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like job identity would help in the situation of making like the healers feel a little bit different towards each other and they act in differently.
Yeah. No, I think that's, we talked about this in the last one, that job identity is one of the, or if not the hottest button topic of the entire expansion and the entirety of the gameplay style of 14 moving forward and the design philosophy. But like I said, we'll move on to stuff like the Healer Strike, which kind of encompasses the difference in job potential and playstyle and stuff. But yeah, Easy, your thoughts on Sage?
I'm kind of in the same boat as like Rocks. I think it's fine for where we're at. Like, it's good. It's got enough kit, but to the point, like I question like does it have more now than say like Scholar, or is it just more convenient to use? Because there is parts of Scholar which is, I feel, more rewarding to play when you play it well. Like you have the micromanagement of the fairy, like being able to choose mechanics with deploy. Like, if you didn't have deploy, would we be able to like choose half the mechanics? It's quite sometimes fun to kind of rule break the game.
Yeah.
So like you still have that aspect of Scholar, which I think will that's not going to change. It's still going to be kind of one strong shielder, but the mitigation part of like Sage is a lot more flexible, which makes it a lot easier to use, and in the long term, most of the time stronger in most situations. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And if I summarize it, like Scholar, I think is harder to play, rewards more in certain situations where it is like, for example, like mitigation checks. Like you can cheese a lot of stuff by just deploying, and then it does the job for you. Sage, easier to play, I think. Like you have instant cast shields. Like while the shielding isn't a lot, like you can easily just pop your Sacred Soil. Like I can never remember the name of it, so I'm gonna call it Sage Sacred Soil.
Sacred Soil.
You don't need to physically place it down on the ground. Like you pop it down and it'll hit everybody. So and it lasts the full duration.
Yeah,
that is like literally like Sage. Like it's like I can't remember the name of it, but it's like this of Scholar.
It's the same move, but it's blue.
Yeah.
So
one of the differences, just want to put out there though, is the use of the fairy with Scholar.
I was just about to ask you about this. Yeah.
So the fairy with Scholar, like for example, you need to change target when you want to heal the person with your attacks with Sage. But with Scholar, the fairy will automatically do that on the lowest target HP anyway.
Right.
So you're not having to like kind of micromanage the healing, and it's a lot easier to kind of like have this regen bot in the middle of the field. But managing the shields, I find that using Seraph is a little bit more flexible in that way, because you can choose when you want to pop that shield during the time duration. You're not going to lose it all over like a dot tick or anything like that.
Yeah.
So like they both have their pros and cons, and like that's why you sometimes see double shield like comps as well, because content at the moment is just push this mitigation button, survive, heal up at the end of it, done, right?
Yeah.
So.
I feel like in comparison, like Sage has got a lot of offensive spells compared to Scholar. Because you've got like, if we like going through them, like you've got your standard dosis, you've got your single target dot, which is your creation dosis. Now you've got the extra dot, which is your creation discrasia. You've got your standard phlegma. You've also got discrasia, which is your one that you just use for movement. You've now got psyche as well, and you've also got pneuma. So when you add all these together, it's got like seven offensive spells in comparison to Scholar, which I mean I don't really play Scholar too much, but I don't think it'd be 7. I feel like it's just got more to the class, which make it a bit more enjoyable to play personally as well. Oh, yeah. So I just feel it's got more kick to it basically than what Scholar has.
So before we move on, just a question more specifically about the shield healers. Would you say that potentially there could be a world in which you have more of an insta shield healer, where the shields are a bit less effective, but they're instant, so there is no cast time, and then you have a shield healer that takes casts, but the shields are stronger. So that's the way that they balance between the two shield healers? Or do you kind of think that the way that they are at the moment, they're just going to continue to work around these specific, I guess, archetypes of shield healers?
I think it's a bit minimal though, like that comparison, because with Sage you still have like, is it Zoe?
Zoe is a thing,
which
yeah.
increases,
Is it
increases
Zoe?
the shield. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like
called
you
Zoe.
just use that. Like if you need a bigger shield, you use that. You're not gonna use it on usually Numa, but if you do need that bigger shield, like for something, you can just use it there, like 8-week shield, and you're done. Yeah, Scholar does have like the generally stronger shield, but I think like comparing the two, like Sucker and like the 8-week shield from Sage,
Mm.
is just. I don't think it's worth comparing them because there's like the difference of them is quite minor. The difference between them like is when you want to cast a deploy Adler, like that is
Yeah.
like massive. You just recitation a deploy, like you guarantee a crit, and then you spread that. That's like one mechanic solved. You know, you don't really need to do
True.
anything else.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So now we will move on to the first pure healer, regen healer. It's the White Mage. Now it's the second most things that I've written down. Obviously, Astro has the biggest changes with its cards. But in terms of stuff for White Mage, it seems like it's just kind of more of the same again, more potency, but now it gets this weirdly massive potency nuke with Glare 4. Thoughts on White Mage?
I think it's fine. Like I think like the changes to White Mage, I don't think it needs much. I think like minor changes to White Mage are fine. It always has been the nuker. Like it always has been like the big damage spells. So just leaning into that more, that's fine. One thing that I guess is a big change is it's always been like the black mage of the healers. It's always been like the one that doesn't move, you know.
Right.
But as time's gone on, they're introducing ways of moving, using your lilies to move. Now using wings to like use Anavant, which is dash forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ethereal shift it is now, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if they want to try and like give the healers a bit more flexibility. I just hope if they're trying to increase like our like movability and like not being so static, that like the content also plays a part in that we have more healing to do during mechanics, you know, like where we're moving and having to do stuff. But yeah, it's like all of its kit at the moment seems to be fine where it's at. Like I don't think there's a part of it that's like concerning. If people are expecting a change with White Mage, then that's really bad to expect a change on like one of the most basic classes. That's like it's an introductory class in my opinion. Like if you want to play it, it's really easy. I mean, I'm playing White Mage at the moment one-handed, so if that says anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the you playing one-handed is it's hard to make the distinction between how good the class is and how good you are because you know you've done ultimate raiding and you're familiar with stuff, but I mean, I don't know if everybody would be able to play White Mage one-handed in Savage, for example, or even in Ultimate. Like, it's one of the it's one of the easier healers, and it kind of has always been the staple, like you say, Black Mage of healers. But I think it's more a testament to how good you are as a healer that you could do it one-handed more than
I
White
don't
Mages
think I could do. I don't think I could do like Savage or Ultimate like currently like one-handed. I think.
Well, hey, look, maybe when we get into the Savage tier and we start clearing, we'll all do one-handed rotations. Especially since we've got the less button bloat now, just one hand every single job.
We only have to look at our recent Thought and Unreal run, don't we, to notice the skill of one-handedness.
I mean, the fact that we managed to get through it at all is a miracle. But
we did get through it eventually, didn't we?
Just about.
It was funny.
All right. Any other thoughts on White Mage? Because again, it's just one of those healers that seems to just be getting slightly better each expansion to keep up with the increase in eye level, and damage and potency and stuff. So yeah, anything else that you think is worth talking about?
I don't know. Unless Rox has got something. I have one more like thought, which
I feel
covers.
With White Mage, like you say, it's a generally easy class, and people gravitate towards it because it's quite a simple class to play. Now, I feel like you wouldn't want to change that too much because you don't want to change the player base's easiness of playing the class. You wouldn't just like make it like Astrologian where you've got absolutely loads of stuff in your kit. It's like, oh my god, what am I doing with this class that I've now got? I will like echo a little bit of what you're saying with the content difficulty, which I mean, we talked about this with the caster ones in the previous, how there was a lot more movement, like specifically for like red mage, like ease of movement was massive, a massive increase. And I feel like white mage is getting a lot of that as well. Like, I mean, with the presence of mind, the glare 4 instant cast being massive potency, that's ease of movement. They get an extra stack of Tetra, which is now 2 stacks. The ethereal shift at level 40, which is probably roughly about the same as Icarus for Sage, on a 60-second cooldown. So a lot of healers and casters are getting a lot of better movement, which does make me think like they've got to bring something to the table with what we're getting here. We need some sort of thing that's going to allow us to utilize all this stuff, which hopefully we'll see. But yeah, white mages. I think the changes to white mage in general are good. It's not much, but it's nice. It's a good like temperance, giving divine grace at 100. Again, this is 400 potency shield, which brings me back to the thing of white mage is supposed to be a pure healer, but a 400 potency shield is quite chunky. It's quite a lot. But it's not a shield healer. This is what I'll go back to saying of the homogenization of barrier and pure healers. I feel like they're just melding too much into one. I don't know how you feel about that, Izu, but it's just, I don't know.
It's the fact as well that it's on a 3-minute cooldown. It's the same. Like you have to use it when you use your wings. Like so you're using it on top of it already.
So you're
Like
forced
using
to
it.
use it.
Yeah, you're kind of forced to use it like during that point. I don't like the idea of having like things locked behind like another skill to use, because then it means you kind of like you don't have freedom with the skill to use it. From a gameplay point, I think it's quite boring. Like,
makes it easier.
Yeah, it makes it a bit, maybe it makes it a bit too easy, but also makes it like, oh, I just want to use this skill at this particular point, even if it was like a 3-minute cooldown, but 3-minute cooldown separately from that would be fine. But it's still quite. And then it gives a region on top, like when it shields, like go down, right?
Yeah, when the shield fades, it gives it gives you a regen for 15 seconds, I believe.
Yeah, shield is 10, 15 seconds for the region. Like, to be honest with the healers, I can see a couple of changes maybe coming, like before the Savage Rage is done. I don't know how much, but I can see a couple of changes coming. And
do you think it's too much?
I think it's too much. Like, I feel like this expansion should have been the start, like with a brand new, like fresh story, like everything being like a reset. It would have been nice to see them start leaning into something else rather than just like the 4 to 3 new spells each class gets like per expansion. Like it doesn't have to be button blow. It could have been like a new system, but again, I don't know. It's everyone's divided on that. So
yeah, I get what you're saying with that, because this also goes back to Sage with the AoE baneful impact being tied behind chain stratagem. Again, you're tying and you're limiting yourself. Like ease of use, like yes, it makes sense, but maybe it makes it a little bit too easy. Maybe it makes it a little bit too restricted. Like why not add that, but maybe not tie it to chain stratagem? I get why they're doing it, but yeah, changes potentially. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, just to very quickly interrupt the it's so difficult to talk about these specific jobs and not talk about stuff like class homogenization and potential difficulty of future fights. But I just want to say we have had these thoughts before where we think because a class is becoming somewhat easier or they're getting less buttons, that the fights will then make up for that fact that there's less difficulty on the jobs, and they'll increase difficulty on the fights or make them more fun. With the removal of some positional requirements before Endwalker came out, we thought that was going to be the case, and it didn't seem to be the case. But I hope now that Yoshi and the dev team seem to be fully aware of the things that we're complaining about, rather than just kind of trying to band-aid things to make it seem like they're doing something, that they will shift design philosophy enough so that we still can retain our class identities or our job identities while also still making them interesting to play in a group setting, while also making them interesting to play during harder fights like Savage and Ultimate. So, yeah.
I agree. Like, this is obviously going to be like changes that come in like maybe like 9.0 or something, because like Dawntrail's locked in now. It's locked in. There's nothing that they can really do about it at the moment. But they
Yeah.
need to act now and like think to change these things for the future. Like they're very good at like listening to, you know, the forums and stuff like that. So hopefully they'll see this and they'll take it on board.
I mean, you would hope they're very good at listening to the forums, but it seems like, I don't know if this is just a confirmation bias or whatever, but it seems like Japanese companies very much take a lot of their suggestions from the Japanese communities more than they do the rest of the world. And I don't know if I'm just completely blind to the reality of this, but this happens in fighting games quite often. So that's kind of where I'm pulling this experience from. But who knows? Because people are complaining about Black Mage so much still, and they haven't communicated at all that they're going to do anything to Black Mage. And I think it's right that they're not communicating to do anything to do with drastic changes, because yes, while it still technically could be in the process of being changed after stuff like the media tour, it's better to release it now before the hard content comes out, and then let everybody experience it first. Because we could absolutely have everybody turn around and say, actually, you know what? This is fine, and the fights make up for it. So everybody can have their own opinions and speculate, but I think it's better to just let it happen first and then see what we can do afterwards.
That's it, because people's opinions might shift as well when they compare it with the content and how hard it is. I think it's a good, like you say, they can speculate it for now and then see how people actually feel about it when they're playing the class in the content.
Yeah.
And then if they still complain about it from then, they will probably maybe look at it further. But it's like, it's not even come out yet. We've not even got our hands on it fully, other than the media tour. So things could easily change. We just need to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we need also seeing how apologies, seeing how the content plays out as well, like the style of the fights.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't know how that's all gonna go, so
it's super important. I mean, using the word hope, I hopefully they have seen this new era of Final Fantasy 14 as a way to move from what A Realm Reborn started, improve on it, and give us something familiar in terms of its overall look and how it plays and works, but individually, mechanics wise and job wise, we can move away from what we started with, because we all know that the code that 2.0 was built upon was the most spaghetti thing in the world. And I'm short of literally just remaking the game again in Unreal Engine 5 or a different proprietary Square Enix engine or whatever, we're going to have to deal with what we have at the moment. And generally, playing video games, you can get a sense of what is able to be done with a specific engine, whatever that engine may be, like the proprietary Rockstar one, Unreal Engine 5, you've got the CryEngine, you've got, Ubisoft use a different one, was it Square Enix uses Pantaray, I think it is, and Capcom uses, what's the Capcom one called? Completely forgot what anyway, it doesn't matter. You get a sense for what is achievable on a specific engine. And unfortunately, we have no idea what is actually technically achievable on the Square engine for 14 because it's so old and has only been adapted from what it used to be. So hopefully, with the inclusions of new quality of life stuff, they are able to find ways to make things better without having to sacrifice something else because of how old the engine is. Anyway, finally, we are going to move on to the one with the biggest changes, Astrologian. Now, I'm going to throw this immediately over to you two, because even though I have also gone through and I have some notes, I want to hear what you two feel about this class in particular.
I think Astro's going to be quite strong. I feel like it's going to be a really strong healer, coming in the next expansion. I'm just going through some of the traits now. A third charge of Essential Dignity is already it's massive.
It's too much.
It's too much. Talk about like spot healing, like without having to ever do a GCD heal ever. Like
Am I
you
right
just
in
don't need
thinking
it.
that essential dignity is it heals more the lower you are? Is that
Yeah,
still a
yeah,
thing?
that's still a thing. Yeah. So
So
like
it's
if they're critical health and you use that, it's like they're going back up at least
yeah,
half their health.
it's already stronger than Tetra, but Tetra's only got 2 stacks for White Mage.
Yeah.
So it's like to give it a third stack, it's like Jesus Christ. I mean, Astrologian already had a lot
Yeah.
already, but like okay,
In
going
fact, you
too
don't
crazy.
like it when you apply your regions, you'll apply a shield wing chance like healing on as normal and neutral set, and then it's level 100. It's like, oh, have an extra 10% mitigation on top of this. Like it has another, like it already has collective unconscious. It has star, and then with the changes like last expansion to like full raid wide star, you're like
Yeah,
there's no like skill
like massive. Like you can't escape this star. You
no,
cannot get out of it.
unless you place it right on the edge of the arena, like the middle of it, which I have done before, like
Yeah, you
more than
will get
once. I'd like
healed.
to say, yeah, but it's quite good. Like I'm falling into that trap of like as soon as you use divination, you have to then use your 2 minute like buff, like
Mm.
oracle, which is. And I don't know what they're playing with that. I don't know if they just got kind of bored and they're like, okay, we're going to sort out healers later and just give them like the same stuff, like
Mm.
for
But this
each.
is this like goes on to the like I'm not going to get too much onto this, but this goes on to the thing of the healer strike.
Yeah.
How people are feeling like healers are an afterthought basically, and like you say, they're giving them very similar skills. Homogenization again. I'm going to use that word, but we'll go on to that afterwards because I don't want to get into that right now. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be strong. Like overall, like the changes to the cards are good and bad. Like the way that they are played are good. I was reading somewhere because like this is the class that I probably will play in
Oh, okay.
Dawntrail, and it's a one I probably read the least on.
Okay.
Because I kind of like want to sit there and like I don't want to like be doomed about like, oh, this is how it's playing, this is how it looks, and I haven't even really like had my hands on with it yet. So I tried to stay. If I'm interested in something, I'll stay away from it a little bit. But I did read through the tooltips, and I did read that you start now. So when you start a fight, you automatically draw 3 cards.
Yes, you start with
Is it Umbral or
Astral
you
draw,
start.
yeah.
Astral? Yeah.
So you get
And
the
apparently,
balance, arrow, and spire just in your like it's stocked up as soon as you load in.
Mhm.
yeah. So for, like from a casual and mid-level player, I think it's going to be a great healer. Like in terms of progression, I think it's going to be quite strong. But when it comes to like optimization, for like damage and kind of high-end content, I do think it's going to fall behind with that because when you think about the sleeve draw and you're having to start with something you physically don't want to start with, you're going to have it drift. It's going to like cause drifting and it's going to cause like awkward optimization.
But
Mm.
the
Yeah.
thing is with whatever we call Oracle. The thing is with that though, you can play that as a pre-pull. So you can pre do this. And from what I could gather, you can play it out of combat. So you should be able to play these cards as your pre-pull. I mean, it's going to be like very busy, and then I'm imagining that you'll go on to like either pull in another Astral or Umbral, depending on what you want to do.
Not
So
like
as much as you're starting with Astral, it's not so much that you have to use these ones. I think you can use it in pre-pull, I think, but I don't know 100% because I don't really play Astrologian. I've not read too much into that, but
Well,
yeah.
if you can use it in pre-pull, like you start with Astral, you balance, and then
Yeah,
you Astral again, and then you balance on your
yeah,
2 best DPSs, and then you've still got an Umbral draw to go.
yeah.
But then it depends on how good your burst is going to be if you hold an Astral for maybe 3-4 seconds into the fight rather than just straight up giving 2 people balance,
Mm.
because they're both the balance is 15 seconds, right? So it's not super long, and most people's openers are maybe about that length depending on the class that you're playing. So I guess it just depends. It's probably dependent on the fight, to be honest. Like when you're first starting out, it's probably a general rule to astral balance, and then go and do your opener. But as you get further into savage fights or ultimates, there may not be opportunities for you to actually get as much damage out because you've got mechanics to do. So it might be an idea to hold. So hopefully, using that word again, they've taken that into account where you don't just double balance immediately off the bat, because that seems like it would be a relatively boring solution to a whole overhaul to a mechanic that used to be completely RNG.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not like too RNG though. Like,
no, I agree. I'm fine with it.
The less RNG is good. I also think it's good. But it comes at this is the unique card effects that you get is the cost of having like less RNG, which I think is a good trade off. I'm very happy to see the back of Astrodyne. To be honest, I didn't really like it. Did not think it was good. I feel like the unique cards really brings back that like the Heaven's Ward vibes of Astrologian, like cards doing different effects. Granted, it's a little bit different to what it was back then. It's like quite a mixture of how Astrologian's changed over the years, but I do prefer it like that. I don't know if you guys like the unique card effects, but
no, I like it. I think it gives like more of its identity back.
It does,
like I do miss like being able to extend the time of the mechanics.
Yeah, that was quite fun.
Bring back time dilation. Bring it back.
Bring it back, please, please.
Balance, please.
I think it's definitely it's a massive change, and I think people have been gradually growing okay with the fact that the less RNG, the better. Because, you know, in Realm Reborn, we started off with so much RNG to do with stuff like proccing on crits and what you're going to pull at a certain point. It's slowly moving away from that, and everything is becoming homogenized in a good way when it comes to reducing the amount of RNG. But I understand people's desire to want a bit more of a challenge by having to be more reactive to a situation that arises that may not be ideal. You know, when Astro came out, it was completely fucking random, and then you could only redraw once every 30 or 60 seconds, I think it was. So if you were in a fight and you didn't get a balance, but you needed to pump DPS and you redrew and you didn't get another balance again, you were fucked, and you had to make do with the cards that you had. And to a degree, I can see why that's fun, because it's a lot more difficult, and you have to make do with that situation. But again, I think that's difficulty for difficulty's sake, and it doesn't really add anything when the fights are not built to maximize the fun of your jobs. And it felt very disjointed after we've all completed Savage, and it was like, oh, okay, this wasn't very fun. But now we have the job as it is with the new overhaul of the cards. I think it's a really good system that I hope they stick with forevermore, and they just either increase the amount of things that you get so it's a little bit busier, or they introduce new aspects to cards, or maybe even new cards on top of the stuff like Astral and Umbral Draw, so that there's still more choice, but it's still guaranteed in what you get depending on what you press.
Yeah. I feel like every expansion, like Astro is always the healer that goes over like an overwhelming change. Like they always change the way the cards work for better or worse. So yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how it plays and everything. But, good.
Yeah, it's a new class every expansion. Like it literally becomes a new class. Like the healing kit is the same. Like it hasn't changed. But like the playstyle of it has.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see how it plays.
I feel like for better or for worse, the thing that I have with Astrologian is just its kit is just insanely strong in comparison. Like it's busy class, but it's got so much. It's got so much to use like healing wise, which is just I do think like healing wise, not talking from a damage perspective, even though it is going to have the utility of like the cards now that they're more unique. I feel like it is probably one of the strongest healers for just pure amounts of healing and off global cooldowns that it can do.
I have a feeling we're all hankering to get to the next part of this conversation. So yeah, I mean, Astrologian, even though it has some of the biggest changes, we're still all happy with the changes. I think most people wouldn't be too surprised to see it go the way that it's going. If there's anything else to do with Astro, let me know before we move on to the most interesting topic of the day.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think like Asteroid, again, like just one last thing to say is like
Mhm.
I can't pull out anything different to what we talked about. Like it has the same type of traits as all the other healers, and then it's level 90 skill, which is different, which we've
Yeah.
just talked about. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
Cool. So now, Healer Strike. So, I think this is one of the stupidest, brain deadiest things to ever come out of this fucking community. I genuinely don't know if anybody's actually going to be participating in this so-called healer strike, in that people will just not queue up for dungeons, or they won't play healers, or whatever, or they won't properly heal in dungeons to maximize their potential, or whatever the fuck the argument is. But I can see the arguments being made, and I empathize with the arguments, but not the strike. What about you two?
like I get like from like a stance, I get why people want to do it. I get why it's being done. Like, but at the same time, like people were like healing dungeons without healers. Like, you take a warrior and 3 DPS, and you were running every single level 90 dungeon. Like,
Yeah.
this expansion, like without a problem. Like, you don't even need like to be a really good player. You just need to have people like do reasonable DPS, and you need the tank, usually the warrior, to be able to kind of push the mitigation like properly. Like, you know, like when to heal themselves, when to, you know, make sure that we're not standing in AoEs.
Yeah.
But I get what they're talking about. Like, there is a point where even in casual content, I still think like you're playing a healer, you still want to be able to do your job. Like, I do feel like as a healer, you should be doing more healing than like overall damage, which is kind of strange as to why like they give us like more potency spells rather than kind of fixing the fight design. But I guess it comes to overall balance in the game, like past expansions, ultimates, and stuff, the way they design the game. So, but yeah,
Because this issue specifically is for really dungeons. Like
Mm.
the dungeons, like you say, they need to be harder. They need to have something that makes healers important. Like, and at the moment, if you're not needed in there, you don't feel important. You're literally just a lower DPS at this point. I do feel like the issue is there where they do need to change how hard the dungeons are, because you do have dungeons which throughout the years which have been very difficult. Like if we look back at some of them, Pharos Sirius back in A Realm Reborn,
Yeah.
the first boss of that, which was the captain which summoned the dogs and stuff, that was a hard hitting boss back in the day. Like that tore you a new arsehole, basically. The first pull
Yeah.
of Bardam's Metal, that was another one where just an instance of like the level change of how healers work. It just everything just seemed to hit like hard. But for me, I liked that because it actually made me heal. It made me do stuff. The Burn last boss, I think was it called Mist Dragon or something? I can't remember what it was called, but
I can't remember. Oh, was
yeah,
the
it
burn?
was Mist Dragon.
yeah,
Yeah.
that boss was also quite difficult. And then Homing's Switch. I remember playing Sage
Oh, Holminster.
in Shadowbringers. I was playing Sage and oh no, it's Endwalker. So I was leveling Shadowbringers dungeons. I remember being on Sage and doing Homing's Switch, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is hard. This is so hard to heal. But yeah, I feel like dungeons overall do need to do something which makes healers feel
So
fun and important.
to play devil's advocate for the other side a little bit, because I am kind of split on this issue. I said this yesterday while streaming. Yes, I would prefer if dungeons were a little bit harder, but I also am of the opinion that tanks and healers should not be DPSs at all. I think generally, if I had full control of the game, then I would say this is the direction that we're going to move in terms of job, or rather role philosophy. Is that tanks are aggro and mitigation players, Healers are either regen or shield players, and DPS are DPS players. So there is no occasion, because you don't have the tools to heal. You don't have the tools to do DPS. Tanks maybe a little bit because they still have to hit something, but generally the roles are not as defined. Oh, that's not true, because they are quite well defined. Everybody's a DPS at the moment, and we can all kind of agree, but the tanks and healers have their own specific jobs within that scope. Whereas personally, I would take the DPS aspects away from both of those roles and make them specifically focus on their specific role 100%. But additionally, I would say that dungeons are filler content at its core. It's there to break up endless amounts of cutscenes and voice acting and story, and they're there to be super casual. So while I would personally like them to be a little bit harder because it makes them more enjoyable for me, I 100% understand why they don't make them a little bit harder. Because what they've done over the years is take on board the criticisms that people just want to pull packs of mobs, AoE them down, and then get into a boss fight. And that makes dungeons as quick as they need to be, so that you can get in, get your tomes, experience what it wants you to experience, and then you're done with it until you need to go in for more leveling, or if it's an end game one, then you go in for tomes. So I get the arguments on both sides. I have a proclivity for one side, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect that we're ever going to get harder dungeons. Now, if we talk about Savage and Ultimates and Extremes, that's a different conversation. But dungeons specifically, I think they have to stay as they are, just be filler content.
Yeah, I feel like I get why the healer strike is going on. Because as a healer main, I do feel it. Like I'm running like expert roulette and stuff, and I feel like I don't really need to do anything. I don't need to do. I'm literally just doing a 1-button rotation or 2-button rotation at this point. It is not fun to do, and I do get that. But I feel like that they're going about it the wrong way, in the sense that it's not going to happen. Like when Dawntrail drops, people are going to play healers. People are going to go into Dawntrail playing the jobs that they find fun and what to do. And a lot of healer mains will go on healer. They will level through the Dawntrail story on healers. Like I feel like if you're wanting to make an impact of this, you kind of need to do it like now, at this time, because I feel otherwise it's just not going to happen. Like you need to do it now so that people like see that people are going to do his if you're going to do it. But when Dawntrail comes, I think it's just going to be an old hashtag, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not going to last. Like people feel like they'll look, and even if they do complain, and say for example Square Enix do change up the dungeons, like in 7.1 they make the dungeon like significantly harder, like to a point where people do need to pay more attention as a healer. I think then they would just get you'd get flashback saying it's too hard, you know. So like they sit in this position, like they probably do want to make it a little bit harder, but they're probably like scared to a point of like how much is too much, like for the player base, and like they don't want to be pushing people away either. So they keep this like content like easy to breeze through, which anyone above the average player can probably do without a healer, which is done most times, especially if you're speedrunning for tomes.
Yeah.
Like you don't take a healer, you just go 3 DPS in a tank. But I like if you go into Ultimate, like the last like phase of DSR, like the healing there is insane. Like it's a lot of healing. Like you do end up having to actually need to GCD heal. The problem is, for the majority of the player base, you should be using more of your GCD heals outside of just like the last phase of Ultimate. Like we shouldn't have to use every single toolkit that we have just for 1% of the content. Like otherwise, it's a lot of stuff wasted that they've put into the game.
I agree in that, and
Yeah,
I think
that I agree with as well.
I'd like it in a dungeon. I'd like a bit more of that in the dungeon, because personally with Sage, I don't use any of that at all in like a dungeon. I feel like I don't need to use it. I'm not saying like make it so much that you have to know every spell going like Crisis, which is like really minimal, which would only really benefit using in like Ultimates and sometimes Savage. But I feel like they do need to add it a little bit more. But then, like you say, it's a very steady balance, because these are story dungeons. These are dungeons that casual players need to do to be able to progress through the story. So if you make it so difficult that they can't get through the story and they get frustrated, and then all that stuff, they're just probably going to not do it, or they're gonna quit, and then they'll probably just stop. Which is obviously not what like the dev team and Yoshiki's wanting. They
No.
don't want that to happen to people. So yeah, like you say, it's a very delicate balance, and yeah, I don't know. It's very difficult, but I do feel like we do need a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Easy was 100% right when you come to stuff like Savage. I mean, even Extremes, because Extremes are the more casual version of the harder content. And now we also have stuff like Criterion Savage, where you have the 4-man stuff, and that's quite difficult. And you probably don't need to use your full breadth of healer skills there either, but you still need to pay more attention, and you still need to be a healer. I think what they could do is what they've done to the Savage raids in terms of differentiating between normal modes and hards. So you have the story modes that you go through and you experience the story, and it's relatively easy. There are a few mechanics here and there that are, need you to pay attention. But then you complete it, you've seen the story, and then you move on. But the hard mode dungeons post-story need to be hard. And I think that's the problem, is that they have this little parentheses where they say, like Somal hard. It's not Somal hard. It's Somal in reverse. It doesn't matter.
It's just a variation of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is where, if we wanted to make just the base dungeons harder, that's where they could make them harder. In addition to the stuff that we already have now with stuff like Criterion, which is the 4-man stuff. And then the Extremes and the Savages and the Ultimates, they could also be made just that little bit harder, because I think in terms of trying to cater to a wider player base as possible, they have to understand that people get better with time. And a majority of the people who are playing this game have been playing for a long fucking time. And I think allowing them to have agency over their own progression is really important, because if you're going into Savage and you've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since 2.0, you're going to be better at figuring out how to play your class in a Savage environment than somebody who joins 6 months ago. So cater to those people, to the people that have been here for a long time and are able to work around mechanics that are generally more difficult than what you would expect to encounter as somebody who's a newer player, because that is what we are. I hate this term, but we're veterans of the game now, and we should be catered to, because we're the ones who have given you thousands of pounds and euros over the years to keep this game going. And I think that even though it's not going to cater to the largest amount of the player base, it's the stuff that continues to get the most engagement outside of stuff like people playing through a story.
Yeah. I feel like what you're saying about that is a good point. Like, you need to cater to the people that have been playing this since 2.0, because they're the people that have stuck with it over the years, and you want to keep it also interesting for them. Another thing that we've got as well is duty support. Like, you don't need to go into a group to be able to do a dungeon now. If you're wanting to maybe separate this and make dungeons a little bit harder, you could have the option to maybe use the duty support with the trusts to be an easier option for people to get through the story if you wanted to go that direction, and then maybe have the actual dungeons a little bit more difficult, because then it caters to both in a way. And it also helps people, I don't know, get a little bit better at skill levels and stuff.
Yeah, just sorry to cut you off just very quickly, because I wanted to address what Rel said in the chat. He was talking about the amount of guides and content that people make, of the game, but generally it's stuff that you make outside of. What's the differentiator I'm trying to make? So yes, it's of the game, but stuff like guides are things that you don't experience in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like external resources.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I agree that guys like that are massively helpful to people trying to improve in their gameplay and trying to get through certain fights. But this goes back to like the third-party argument. Should Final Fantasy XIV acknowledge, or Square Enix rather, acknowledge the existence of third-party resources to help improve people's gameplay? Because I'm sure a lot of us would probably be like, if you add in a personal DPS meter that you potentially opt in or opt out of being able to share with other people, then that's fine.
Yes.
Because you can look at your performance and gauge it against other people's who have shared theirs and say, what are they doing that I'm not doing to improve myself? But
Yes.
that's an inclusion of a third-party tool that Square Enix has been very open about. They don't explicitly want you to be using.
Mhm.
So you have a massive split in the player base between should the third-party tools exist, and if they should exist, how do they inform how a dev team make content? Because if they acknowledge these third-party tools, just to finish up, if they acknowledge them, it makes the games easier because you have stuff like auto markers, you have a DPS meter, you know where you need to be bursting, whatever. But if you don't have those resources, everything is just on you and your team to figure out yourselves, which makes it harder by default. And I don't know how to resolve that argument because I sometimes think that a personal DPS meter is fine. But then sometimes I just think, why don't we just go back to good old days 2.0? Everything is figured out in game as a group. So I'm split on this as well.
I think like that's just like a totally different type of conversation though, like mechanical like use and stuff like that. Like I mean, there's mechanical difficulty and like there's playing your job as a difficulty. And the mechanical difficulty in the game, I think we're fine where we are right now. I don't think there's anything that's like substantially saying this is too difficult, this is too easy. You have the different varying levels of content for that. I do think extremes have got a little bit easier over the years. But other than that, I don't think there's much of a change really there. I think from a healer point of view, I want the content to be more engaging for a healer and not just me pushing. Like there's a thing like while there is more healing in the last phases of like Savage or like Ultimate, there's like resources out there where you have like a graph and it says push these buttons in this order for this mechanic.
Yeah.
Now that's like I don't want to be having to do that. Like I do think if I was to link it back into mechanical, healers are really proactive. Like we already know once you've done the fight once or twice, like or you're progging it and you pass a certain phase, you know that this damage is going to come out. You know that you need this resource. I feel like there should be a little bit of a mix up on that. And I don't know. We don't know. It might happen. We don't know what's going to happen. But it'd be nice to say, right, oh shit. Instead of this time, this mechanic's happening instead. Right, okay, I can't use this resource here. I need to maybe like use a different type of resource, or I might even just need to GCD heal this because I need to save this specific resource for later. Now, I'll probably get like shot in the face, and people will say, "Well, it's going to muck up my DPS rotation because this is a power like damage button and stuff like that." For me, it doesn't bother. Like, it doesn't bother me. I'd rather have like a good like healing. Like, not really, because I do like to see like a good DPS pass. Like, but I like to see like a nice healing like pass like come into play where people are actually doing their job as a healer rather than an actual like damage dealer.
Yeah.
Does
I
that
feel
make
like if you make stuff like harder for healing though across the board, I feel that like that's going to also affect everyone's healing DPS across the board. So you might not see as high numbers as what you're doing now because you'll be healing more, but it will also change like the skill level as well because I think like people will have to like really like time and choose and prepare for like certain heals and stuff like that if everything's hitting a bit harder. And it will really like make the difference between someone who DPSs more as a healer. You'd see like more of a difference is what I'm saying. So yeah, I do think that would be one way to go. The other way to go is probably just bring cleric stands back.
Oh, stop! Don't. Please no. Oh, God.
I loved cleric stands. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it. I loved cleric stands.
You're the only one. This is a good thing.
No,
it's
I'm
gone.
not. There are people like me.
I liked cleric stands.
I'm not alone.
There you go. We shall be heard.
I loved cleric stands. I liked it. Like playing a white mage with cleric stance was great because you could put like stone skin up and benediction, and it cost you nothing.
I guess that's true. So, in terms of taking all of this information, kind of trying to wrap it up in a little bow, what What would you say would be the? I'll go to Roxas first. What would you say would be the best case scenario for you in terms of moving forward with healers?
Oh god, that's a really loaded question.
Hell yeah! Put yourself out there.
Um,
Get the pitchforks ready.
Could you say it again, please? A little bit more slowly.
I mean, I know the brain's working at like half speed at the moment.
Honestly, like, you said it, and I was just like, what? I felt like an interview. Like,
To wrap this whole thing up in a nice, tight, clean package, what would you say would be the best course of action going forward for healers that the devs could take? And this is your opinion. I'm not saying that this is what you think they should do, but yeah.
Yeah. If we really had to wrap it up, because I could honestly talk about Healer Strike for a lot longer.
Well, yeah, so could I.
But if I was to say something to the dev team, I would say, like, for me personally, as a veteran player, which obviously is different for other people, I think that dungeons need to be harder. I feel like class homogenization needs to be separated somehow. Like when they were going back to the shield and pure healers, I feel like that was a good movement because it really did separate the healers. But they have just melded into one, so I would probably change that as well. I feel like there's a problem which is not so much with healers, but in order for like healers to do more pure healing, I feel like tanks have too much. I feel like that because tanks have too much, it enroaches on the healer role, and it makes them useless. Pretty much, it makes them less important. So I think that tanks should have less healing. I feel like healers should do more healing. Like I get it's a nice thing to do for tanks. I'm not wanting to like really take that away from them. But when I say that it enroaches on healers, it really does. Like we feel useless because a paladin uses clemency, or if they use what's the Heart of Corundum, is it, or something like that, that heals them as well and gives them story or whatever.
Yeah.
They've got too much. They've got too much basically. Give it back to healers, make their role individual, which is also like to do with the reses as well. Make that maybe pure healer. A lot of stuff that needs to be made to make. Yeah, I feel like reses should be on healers only.
Well,
personally.
you said like pure healers, right?
No, sorry, I mean like purely on.
Oh,
healers,
you mean just on the
what
healer?
meant.
I see.
Sorry,
I see.
Not pure, yeah. No,
Take
like,
them away from shield healers. Then you run a double healer, a double shield healer comp, and you got no fucking reses.
Yeah, it's fuck stage and the scholar, honestly. No, just give reses to healers. Like red mage is a bit of a weird one because they actually have like they're used for that, so it might make their class a little bit like, but maybe give them something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my take from it, and that's what I'd like the devs to do. So yes, please for next expansion, devs. Love you. Thank you.
Okay, fair. And what about you, Easy?
If I was to like wrap it up, first I think we were talking about it before, like with the duty support with the NPCs, like separate that, because at the moment I feel like specifically like the leveling and end game dungeons are all just kind of scaled and built around them. Like they have to make like the healing mechanics and everything just built around being able to do with, the healer. Oh, sorry, I've just fixing that. Right, so
for context, Easy broke his arm falling down the stairs.
You put your arm back on, you put your arm back on there. Just slide right in there.
Put it back on.
Like a Lego man.
Yeah, like they happen to scale it around the use of NPCs. Now, just on the mechanical side of things, you kind of like it makes it a lot easier as well, right? There's going to be less healing to do and stuff. So yeah, like I feel like Roxa said before, separate them maybe. Do one that's easier with the NPCs and one that's just doesn't have to be too much harder, but a little bit harder without. The damages in like the damage dealt, like auto attack damage as well. Like that's one thing I never talked about is bosses don't auto attack like they used to. Like on tanks. So you're sitting there like in top, right? There's maybe one part of the fight where you're like, oh shit, I need to watch the tank's health. And that's, I think, like at the beginning of phase 2, like they appear and they take a tank bust and they take a couple of auto attacks. Like they're and maybe Hello World, maybe, where they take like a couple of auto attacks during the mechanic. But there's nothing really that says like, shit, I need to watch these tanks during this mechanic. It's not enough. Like sometimes we do let tanks die. I'm sorry, tanks, but it happens. Like when you're learning a mechanic or something. But for most of the time, you could probably just pop your like OGCD AOE heal, and they're fine, right? Like for the majority of the time. You just heal them up after a tank buster, right? Jobs are good, because they can sustain themselves so much. Like going back to the issue with tanks having too much resources, so then we're like twiddling our thumbs out, just pushing glare, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, that needs to be adjusted. I feel like if they're going to give tanks more resources, and tanks want these resources, and healers are kind of sitting on the fence, then make the bosses do more. Like, make them hit harder in content where it actually really matters. Dungeons doesn't really matter for dungeons, right? Dungeons are dungeons. If people want harder dungeons, like everyone should kick and scream, and then when it is harder and they complain about it, like yeah, that's their fault.
God.
But
just
yeah,
on the subject,
okay,
sorry, while we're just talking about that, about like tanks having too much, basically. I saw somewhere that an ultimate raid was basically completed without a healer.
Yeah.
Which was used. They had a paladin and a reg mage to use 75 casts of Clemency and 75 casts of the Cure on the Omega Protocol to basically kill it. Now, these people are absolute gods of the game. Like,
What fight was this on? Sorry.
The Omega Protocol. They completed it without a healer, basically.
Okay.
And they used 75 Clemencies and 75 Cures to heal, with a lot of like planned mitigation and stuff like that. But this is the point that I'm making. Like, this is a very out there statement, because no one, like, do you think you'd really be able to like clear the Omega Protocol without a healer? Hell fucking no. Like, that's like not something that people can do. But it just goes to show that this is a massive amount of global cooldown heals casts that a healer could easily cover. So it goes back to what I was saying about how I feel like this is a very big statement to be able to do that, but I feel like they do need to have less.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't need to be much, but it just needs something. Like, there is something that needs to be done. Not worth of a strike, I don't think. But yeah, like it's something needs to be done, and the homogenization needs to be kind of like looked at next expansion. I think for now, I get it. It's fine. There's a big update, like in terms of graphics, like new story. But I'll let them off. Like I'll let them have a free pass.
I mean,
This one
communities
time.
nowadays, gaming communities especially, they see a thing and they go absolutely fucking insane until they even get their hands on it. So
people love to jump on stuff as well. Like,
yeah, exactly.
People see a hashtag and they're like, yeah, healer strike. Well,
But like, to be fair, I've not really seen anything that says like, oh god, this like I am going to do a healer. Like I've not seen somebody like yet who's saying that they are going to heal a strike, like that they are physically doing it. So this could literally just be one person or a group of like friends that have said it, and it's spread into like a meme. Like,
yeah, well, they got so many pages on like a forum or something, didn't they? And they were saying like, put hashtag healer strike in your search info, blah, blah. And I've looked at a lot of search info since then. I've not seen one person say this.
It's the Coney 2012 of Final Fantasy 14. That's exactly what it is. Nobody gives a shit like a week later after you say it.
I do agree with some points, but I don't think it's going to happen. And this is another reason why I don't think it's going to happen as well. Like if you don't need a healer in the dungeon, how is this strike going to be effective? Because usually when a strike works, it's because you need that person there. If you're not there, then you're just proving the point that you're not needed. So the strike's not going to work.
That would be hilarious if the devs be like, oh, actually, you don't need healers for dungeons? Well, never mind then. We're just not going to make it a requirement to have a healer, even in Duty Finder. Just, there you go, 3 DPS, 1 tank. See you later.
This will be when it turns into like Guild Wars 2, and there's no specific like triad of like tank, healer, DPS. It'll just all be like just your class and you spec it.
Yeah. So, okay, if I was asking that question to myself to wrap it up nicely in a cute little present, I would say I understand that my expectation is completely unrealistic in terms of taking away the damage aspect of healers and tanks. So realistically, moving forward, I would say keep base dungeons as they are. Make the hard dungeons the hard versions of dungeons with more healing checks, more damage checks, while still being dungeons that you're able to complete with a random pugged 4-man. And then just look into healer kits overall, just seeing where you can find these points of contention within the community. And this is also where people are a little bit wary, because go back to fighting game examples. People think that devs shouldn't listen to the top 1-2% of players, the ones who compete, who make it to tournaments and win them, because then they will be unplayable for casual audiences. I personally don't think that's true, because I think that all it does is raise the skill ceiling and then make it imperative that everybody gets better at the game in order to reach that certain level. And I think that's only a good thing. So if you take that approach to Final Fantasy XIV, you increase the skill ceilings of all of these different fights, where you need to be healing more, you need to be looking at your mitigation rotations for tanks, and then forcing those changes onto the people that want to engage in that content. So extremes, savages, and ultimates. And that's kind of where I have to stand. Otherwise, I'll go on even more of a rant about homogenization.
Basically, what Dan's saying is, I'm a DPS main, healers at go.
Just get good, as they say.
Yeah.
Oh no, go on.
So, the thing we just need to watch out for is just what is the content going to be like, and see from there. Then take it to the forums, because at the moment, none of us have got the actual content. Even the media tour is one dungeon and open world stuff. They haven't got to the chunk of the game yet. So
yeah, this is a thing for me. They said that Yoshi P said that there was going to be a difficulty ramp up. Now they said that, and then Xeno clearly showed this wasn't true in the dungeons. So I'm wondering where to expect this.
Well, that's the thing, is that it should not be expected in the dungeons, because the dungeons is it's the filler content. It's the stuff to break up the story. It's meant to be easy. And the fact that Xeno was able to do it doesn't mean anything, because it's not supposed to be able to be done with it, but it's able to be done with 3 DPSs and 1 tank, because it isn't that difficult. But when you move on to the stuff that is supposed to be difficult, that's where the difficulty ramp up needs to happen. Because, everybody was talking about the fact that Savage was becoming too easy after Heaven's Ward. And then we got the ultimate starting to come in. And that is where Yoshi P and the dev team can be balls to the wall, fuck you, these are the mechanics that are going to make you want to rip the skin off your dick every single time you go into this fight, because it's difficult as hell, and you're going to be spending months on these fights because they're hard. And that is where the difficulty spike was implemented first. And now if people still think that Savage or extremes aren't difficult enough and they want them to be more difficult, that's where they need to be, and Criterion and hard mode dungeons, in my opinion. I think dungeons are fine as they are. Let them be soloable for all I care. Not everybody's going to want to do it. Not everybody's going to be able to do it. And I think that's where player agency is critical in this argument, because people don't consider that point about player agency when they talk about this stuff.
Yeah, the difficulty spike was first seen, obviously so we had Coil as his first raid, and then people complained that the Coil was basically too easy. So, and then they brought out Gordius. And that was when shit really hit the fan. They were oh my god, what have we done? What have we done? So then they obviously made it. they learned from that, and then they made it easy. So maybe we should go back to Gordius days. I don't know. Maybe
don't say that, because I unironically think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's not. Gordius isn't actually hard. The hardest thing
about
Gordius...
back in the day,
it was hard for us then. If we were to do Gordius now, the same difficulty, it would not be as hard. Honestly, it would not be as hard.
Well, I suppose we had less kits back then as well. Maybe with the kits that we have now, and we've progressed a lot as players in skill as well.
I think it's player skill. I think player skill is increased, and also there was a lot of like gear check as well. Like you had to like have like a couple of like there was DPS checks obviously, but you needed the gear to be able to meet those DPS checks, and it made the healing easier. So yeah, like unless they want to go down that route, which I don't think anybody wants.
I'm saying, yeah, bring it back.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the thing. I unironically think that it's a good idea to go back to the Gordius difficulty, but not in the sense that difficulty for us now. It was difficult relative to how good we were as players then. So I'm saying make the difficulty relative to how we are now, because we've had so much time to get used to all different types of mechanics. And if we're able to get that level of difficulty for Savage, just imagine how difficult the next Ultimate's going to be. It's going to be even less people clearing it. And I'm fine with that.
But that makes it more special.
Yeah.
It makes it more special, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And this, fuck, I'm going to, oh my God.
You're going to go off on a tangent.
My brain
I feel it.
Yeah, fuck. So this is the part that I hate, right? And I said this to a couple of other people. Talking about this makes me want to be a right winger, because it makes me feel like I'm not a left leaning person, because I hate this idea that everybody should be able to do everything in a video game because video games are for everyone. No, they're not. Because there's games like Souls that are built for specific people who want to get through these types of content. If you are a Souls-born player, then you translate that to stuff like Savage and Ultimates. You have to sit there and grind your ass off to learn these mechanics at a group setting and do your job, as well as everybody else doing theirs, to be able to clear these things, these fights, these encounters. It frustrates me when people want everything handed to them on a plate because they feel like it's unfair that they're missing out on something because they aren't good enough to reach a certain threshold. Well, that's life. There are certain things that you're not going to be able to do because you're not good enough to do them. And that just translates into video games that have a competitive aspect to them. And I don't think this should be a hot take. This just is how video games are. Like, you play a From game like Armored Core or Dark Souls or Sekiro, if you're shit at the game, you fail. You have to get good. And it's not a meme, it's real. And I want people to acknowledge that it's not a bad thing that these things are difficult.
Mm.
Your fault, Roxas.
I agree. I'm agreeing with you right now. You don't need to. You don't need to deflect on that.
Oh, man.
I agree. People need to get good.
Yes, yes,
good.
Please.
Yeah.
Asking politely to everybody to just get good. But however, okay, fuck. Yes, there is a degree.
I took it, and I get what you're saying.
Well,
playing with one hand, the game's not meant for me.
But correct. Well, you've got one hand on your dick while you're playing with one hand. I'm
if
sure.
You die 3 times in Fallen Unreal. I mean, you should just unsubscribe and just.
That isn't to say that there are some instances in which things are too hard, because they absolutely are. Because you have these varying difficulties for a reason, right? There is a reason why we don't just have story mode and ultimate. There are good reasons for things being nerfed, especially like a fight like A3, because some of it was just ridiculously difficult to clear. And now that is completely up to the dev team to decide what percentage of the player base should be able to clear this, depending on how good their player base is. Which is where the nuance comes in. Yes, you need to get good, but there will always be instances in which things are unfair. Both of those statements can be true.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the like there was oh god, let me get my words right. There was something similar recently with P8S where mechanically it was a harder fight, like compared to like the other fights this expansion, like outside of Ultimate. And then on top of that, I added an extremely hard DPS check. Like, it was the hardest DPS check probably, like, maybe even since like Heavensward. I'd say at least definitely since Shiva, because Shiva was quite a hard DPS check as well.
Was, and the other one,
yeah,
Shiva.
But I think it was harder than that. Like, it got to the point where groups were really min-maxing everything they could do to try and get through it. There was a couple like if you got crit lucky, like your min-max doesn't really count. Like, that's another topic as well for another day. Is like direct crit hit kind of variance for damage. But like they nerfed that. Like, was it the week or 2 weeks after? just so like groups can start getting through it. Like,
Was that
because
Hephaestus P8 Savage? I'm trying to think which one it was.
P8.
hepatitis. I call him hepatitis.
Hepatitis.
Yeah, it's called hepatitis.
Hepatitis B, no.
There's a
I
hepatitis.
don't know.
Mr. Ari, like Ari
Professor, I
Dobos,
think
yeah.
it's called. But yeah, it is that one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do remember it being quite a tough check.
Yeah.
But maybe I didn't get done.
It's
to it
Hephaestus,
until
you
after the-
fucking degenerate. Sorry.
Hephaestus.
The healing trick there as well. Like I feel like the healing check in that fight was reasonable as well. Like it wasn't like there was nothing that was like, oh my god, this is too difficult. Like to the point where like you're screaming for it to be nerfed, but you weren't sitting there thinking it was too easy either. Like it was just right. It was just a nice. It was perfect in a nice sense. I think it was a really good fight.
It was the Goldilocks.
Yeah. It's just a DPS check.
That's what they just need to aim for, is the Goldilocks of every single fight, every encounter. I think that's also what we need to be reasonable about as well, is that you can't have every single fight be this raid tier defining amazing mechanics check, because I don't think they'd ever get anything else done if all they were doing was worrying about how to make the absolute best fight every single time. I think, they have other priorities that they need to get to, and it's also reasonable that the smaller amount of the player base that's going to engage in the content, initially at least, should be given less resources initially. So, you focus on the story, focus on the dungeons, maybe even the extremes or the trials or whatever. And then when you move on to the savage stuff, you have to just find a way to make it fun enough and difficult enough that people want to continue to play through it. I mean, regardless of how people feel about tiers, raiders will clear it anyway, and then they'll make it known how shit they think the tier is. But then, that's on the player base to make it known to the dev team in the forums or in streams or whatever that while we did clear the raid tier, we think these mechanics were bad, we thought these were good. So.
Yeah, and I think that'll reflect on how healers are perceived in Dawntrail as well. I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Right. Anything else before we close it out?
I think we've covered quite a lot. Unless Rox, you've got something to say.
He's always got something to say.
Mythic Plus. I'm maybe throwing that out there. That dungeons could maybe use a Mythic Plus.
Well, that's the alternative of hard dungeon. Well, not alternative, but what hard dungeons could be, or what isn't that what Criterion's meant to be?
No, Criterion's something totally different. Like, it's not like because Mythic Plus is like scaling, right? It's meant to be done kind of almost infinitely, right? It gets harder and harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I think what you're saying, Dan, is a good point. Like, so, for example, you know how we have like the extreme raids, and then we have the story raid. I think all the story raids should just be a like when you unlock it, you unlock story raids, so you can do it with trusts straight there and then, or you can just jump into the hard mode straight away.
That's interesting. Do you think you could do it with trusts? That might be an interesting way to.
No. Like you don't like the trust version is specifically there for story. Like
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then you have the hard version, and then your roulette is all extreme, stuff like that, and then that will increase your poetic gain, your tombstone gain by doing the harder version. So you're rewarded from doing it. So you don't need to run as many that week. Yeah.
Could be a solution.
I think that would be a good option.
Sweet.
But yeah, again, everyone just does hunt trains nowadays anyway.
Oh god. Oh, that's gonna be the chat is gonna be filled with hunt trains the first few months, which is not a bad thing. It's always fun. Like fate trains as well. Oh fuck! Didn't even talk about the fates. Like the new fates for a new big mount or whatever. Those are gonna be cool. Can't wait for breaking instances with just like Ixion. Oh, that's the thing. What was the this is completely not related to healers at all, but what was the thing that they implemented when they had an overload of players trying to get into one area? What was the thing that they differentiated zones into?
1, 2, and 3 instances.
Was it just instances? Is that what they called them?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was,
okay.
Yeah,
For some reason,
you got teleported in there to a random one, and then if people in your party, it would bring you into the instance if there was space, I believe, or something like that. But
okay.
It's the same, but just separates it. So you could do like 2 hunts per instance, basically. So if you had 3 instances, you could get 6 hunts for like 1 maybe, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually something I didn't consider talking about, maybe for the next one before. Actually, that's interesting. So the next one, the next SOULScast, if we do it weekly, will be the day before. It will be next Thursday. So that's probably a good topic to discuss, talking about zones and fates and stuff like that and how they fit in with difficulty balance and stuff like that. But we'll talk about it in the Discord about what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else? Any last words, remarks, insults you want to get in before I close us out?
No, I think I'm gonna leave it there actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've covered pretty much all that needs to be covered.
Mhm.
for healers.
Yeah. It's been good to chat about it though.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
enjoyed talking about it really,
Yeah.
really much. Because it really just like lays everything out on the table as well. Like you're having these thoughts, but when you compare it and other people's opinions and thoughts and feelings on it all, it's really, really shows a dynamic of how different people feel about it, which is very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I want as many of people in the FC or anybody who's interested to come on and help with this new piece of content. Because, you know, not only am I have a goal with this, but it's also just really good for people to be able to express themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for watching, everybody. That was SOULScast number 2, based around the media tour changes for the healers and also talking about the healer strike. Before I close everything out, just to let you know, the first SOULScast is now up on my YouTube channel. If you want to go and check that out, feel free to like and subscribe so that you get updates every time a new video is uploaded. It will be mostly Final Fantasy 14 stuff until Soul Calibur 7 gets released. And then, yeah, we will hopefully be back next week, Thursday, the day before Dawntrail Early Access. And I don't think I have anything else to say. So that is going to be goodbye from Roxas.
Catch you in a bit, guys.
That's goodbye from Izu.
I'll see you in a little bit.
And that's going to be goodbye from me. Stick around because I'm going to be jumping on Final Fantasy to do some more Black Mage leveling because I hate myself. And that will be in about 5-6 minutes time. I just need to go to the loo, get some water. But yeah, thank you for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you later.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.